Welcome, everybody. My name is Bernie Reichart. I'm the Director of Development at Hockey Manitoba, and I was told to introduce this session as Weekend at Bernie's. I'm sure you guys are all... I'm the alive part of it, like the first couple minutes of the movie when he's alive, not the dead part. I'm going to let each of these gentlemen introduce themselves, 30 seconds. We're just going to have some general questions about some of the stuff we've talked about this weekend and some of the stuff that Hockey Manitoba is looking at doing as we move forward here in the next couple of years. So I'll start on my far left and just a quick introduction, and we'll go from there.
I'm Don McKee. I own Card Sharks.
Hi, I'm Glenn Andreessen, Executive Director of Minnesota Hockey, and yet to appear on a game show.
Roger Grillo, I work for USA Hockey. I'm a regional manager, the Northeast, out in New England, with a new program. Not new, it's about 9 years old now, with the American Development Model.
Bob Caldwell, retired history teacher, and my main job right now is I've got 4 grandkids, so that's my full-time job.
All right. Well, I think we'll start off just with a real general question, just about probably the theme of the weekend is growing the game, and I'm not going to give my own thoughts about it as in the moderator. Maybe I'll kind of chime in every once in a while, but I'll give everyone a chance to maybe just give their initial thoughts on what we can do as an organization to grow the game in our province, based on what we've heard, obviously through the weekend, and what we will hear in the presentations this afternoon, and just so some takeaways, maybe that they feel we can do as an organization. So we'll start back down on the right with my friend Bob Caldwell from Deloraine. Bob?
Growing the game. I think just make it a fun place to be. I've got a little 4-year-old grandson who lives in Hartney, Manitoba, and I just hope all the kids his age are encouraged to come out and give the game a try and enjoy it. And I think it's incumbent on us as coaches in Hockey Manitoba just to make that as fun as it can possibly be, at the same time teaching the kids skills, not systems, not tactics, just at that level get a good skill basis and let them have fun in the game and stay in the game for a long time like all of us here have.
And I would just reconfirm that. I think the focus that we're trying to get our folks in similar positions that you all are in is to focus on passion and development. And to keep the eye on the ball of keeping kids in the game as long as possible. We've been fortunate over the last couple of years to, as Glenn mentioned yesterday in Minnesota, to break some records nationally with new kids coming into the sport and retaining kids. But our goal, when we first started 9 years ago, 60% of the kids that started ice hockey in the United States were out by first-year Pee Wee, so about 12 years old. 60%. That's a pretty scary number, so we're really working hard on making sure the game's fun and it's developmentally sound, so that kids have an opportunity to reach their full potential and reach their dreams.
Yeah, and I should probably start off by admitting that my oldest daughter is 7 years old and played hockey last year and quit this year, so I probably am not deserving of being on this panel. If I can't, my whole job is to get kids playing hockey, and I can't get my own kid to play hockey. But I've got 3 more behind her. Hopefully, we'll take the reins in hockey. But I do think, when we talk about getting more kids into hockey, I think the biggest thing is retaining them, like Roger said. Because if you're doing that, if kids are having fun, the word's going to spread that this is a fun place for other kids to join up. And if you keep it fun, if you keep it affordable, if you keep it at the point where other new families into hockey feel like it's a welcoming community, I think the game will be in good shape. So that's what we want to keep fostering in Minnesota. And I still have a little bit of time to talk my daughter into coming back.
Being a former educator for 34 years, I used to more or less brag if you got through a year with a staff of 35 with no parents coming in and complaining about a teacher. I think sport is the same way. I think a bad coach will definitely destroy, a hockey program in a community. I think kids need positive experiences. So if I was saying what is the most critical thing you have to do is make sure you work with getting your best coaches and having them well trained to be outstanding in your community, especially starting at the bottom and move it slowly to the top.
So this is a question for anyone who wants to chime in, but if we're talking to, you know, administrators of the game that take care of our members across our province, what would your you know, number one thing be, you know, as far as what we can do as an organization to provide our associations with the tools that they need to keep kids in the game? Anybody?
I think one of the hard things about this topic a little bit is that when young kids first come into hockey, and young parents, when they first get a taste of the sport, it's an addictive sport. It's a great sport. It's the best sport on the planet. But most young kids and young families have passion. If you asked a little 6, 7, 8-year-old, let's go to the rink every day and let's travel, you know, to Toronto every weekend and stay in a hotel and go swimming and play hockey, and they'd say, yeah, let's do that all the time. And I think the challenge is taking that passion and cocooning it, protecting it, and not feeding that monster too much too soon, because you want that kid at 14, 15, 16, when it's time to really have that passion to take that next step, if that's what they desire to do. It takes a lot of sacrifice and passion to take that next step as an athlete. So I think the biggest mistake we see in the United States is these people get in, they get excited, they have the energy, they have the passion, and they stoke it and they feed it, and then when it's time to pass the responsibility to the athlete when they're older, the kid's eyes have rolled back in their head and they say, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm burnt out. So really to step back and be patient and let things happen a little bit more naturally is probably the best advice I could give, just living through it as a hockey parent myself, but also seeing what happens in all different parts of not only our country, but across the world.
Yeah, and just to me, help your coaches, help your local coaches, and check with them and see how they're doing. Make sure practices are fun. Make sure there's skill development going on in practice, because kids, if it's fun and if they conceive that they're learning skills, that they'll stay excited. Like Roger said, they'll keep going, and they'll when they're not learning and when they're not having fun, they're going to quit. All of us would. So I work with Bernie in the coach development part of Hockey Manitoba, and we're always trying to find ways to reach coaches. Like we'll talk later about specialty clinics and things like that, and get the message out about small area games. And had a great talk with a couple of guys with Boys of Maine over lunch who just talked about how much the reduction in the ice meant to how much their kids learned and how much fun their kids have. So if we can stay on top of that, and we have to realize you're all volunteers, and I'm a volunteer. I don't have a paid position, and we have to me, it's our job to help those volunteer coaches be the best they can be.
I would say that you know, we have people from Hockey Canada and people from USA Hockey here, and I would say I know it's tempting for families and for people in local communities when they come up with something to say, you know, we're fine here. We don't need to do that. We've always been good. We don't need to change things. I know Roger faced that with the American Development Model. And we're facing it right now because USA Hockey just implemented a rule where you can no longer ice the puck when you're shorthanded for 14 and below. And inevitably, every time things like that come about, we face pushback because it's not the way things have been done here. So USA Hockey and Hockey Canada, they're not doing these things just to create rules to make our lives harder. They're doing it for the betterment of the kids. So I would just say, as administrators, be open and try to understand what is behind these rules, because just off experience, short experience with this icing rule, and I think Roger's ADM group had a lot to do with it. It is a fantastic thing to foster skill development for these young kids. So Hockey Canada and USA Hockey, they're doing these things because they put a lot of time and effort and research into it, and they're doing it because it's best for the kids.
I'll just give you a quick example from the other night. I was doing an evaluation with a coach who was coaching 13 and 14-year-olds, Bantam. It was a AAA program. At the end of the game, I wanted to do a post brief with them after the game, and I said, well, I'll meet you down here. He said, oh, I'm sorry. He said, I don't leave until I shake the hand of every boy coming out of the dressing room at the end of the game and thank him for his commitment, okay, to the team that night. Win or lose, he waits until the last player has left the dressing room and shook hands with everything. I think we have to show kids as a coach that we really care for them. And that caring attitude, okay, is going to continue to help our game grow.
Sure. Yep.
One of the things too that for me was an eye-opening experience growing up in Minnesota, but then going out east and basically being out east for the last 30 plus years, is when I talked to local associations, the cost to play 8 and under hockey is almost identical to the cost to play 14 and under hockey in a lot of the associations, and part of that's because they get the same. They get their 2 practices a week and their 2 games on the weekend, and so if you play, you know, mite hockey and you're playing bantam hockey in the States, it's a lot of places it's the same cost. And what kind of made me step back when I first realized that is I asked people, does that make any sense? Does it make any sense that the structure for somebody, these guys are in education, you would never structure elementary school anywhere near what high school is structured like, because it just doesn't work for either group. It's just something to think back as administrators on how your associations are structured and what the end goal is.
I'm going to get to seasonal structure in a minute, but I can't move on without making my own comment. I'm sorry. I've known Rick for a number of years as well. I started as technical director when Rick was still at Hockey Alberta, and even back when we had our first discussions. I'm a huge believer in how organizations run their programs. Organizations put coaches in place. They should hold coaches accountable. They're there for the betterment of the players, and the betterment of the players, for the most part, is affected by how teams are run and how coaches run those teams. So, without going into any sort of extended, since I'm the moderator and I shouldn't be commenting, I'm a huge believer in that. I just think that coaches have such an effect, as we've heard in the presentations. As Bob and I and Dustin and the people in the office work on the coaching program, they have such a huge effect on how our programs run, both in your associations, in your regions, and obviously through our provincial teams in our province. So I can't emphasize that enough. You as association leaders are tasked with that responsibility. It shouldn't, to me, and some of the stuff I've heard in the office over the years, it seems sometimes that the coaches are running the organizations, which to me is a little bit putting the cart before the horse. So, just my opinion. A couple of the comments that we've heard lead into the next topic that I think we have some time to discuss here is the structure of our seasons. I've been in the organization for a number of years, and certainly from my early years to where we are now, the dynamics of our world have changed. Information has changed. Family structures have changed immensely. The rural city populations have changed a lot, but we end up sometimes still doing the same things. Scott said last night, we have tryouts the first week of hockey. And, it's like a kid walking into class and basically saying, take a test. And if you don't do well, you go down to a level where you may not get the same amount of education, that type of thing. So, those are the types of things I think we probably should start having. I know at the national level, Peter and I are in meetings in Calgary next week, and it's one of the main topics of our presentations is the seasonal structure and how we organize the game. Should we be offering alternatives to what we currently do, i.e. shorter seasons, 2 separate seasons, maybe a season in the summer, so kids could play school sports in the winter time and have something spring, summer. So anyway, a whole bunch of things I just thought I'd start off the conversation with, and maybe we'll start with Roger, and we'll see what his opinion is.
Yeah, I think the length of the season is obviously a huge issue in our area because a lot of our rinks have become privately owned. And so we have a little bit of a conflict with USA Hockey in that we're preaching multi-sport athletes, encourage them to do other sports, and yet we need our rinks to stay open and be sustained business practices so that they can make money and not shut down and close, because obviously if we lose rinks, we're losing opportunities for kids to play. And so we've sat back and thought about it, and if I really honestly took the number of hours that I skated as a kid growing up in Minnesota, both in the rink and then unstructurally on the pond or the outdoor rinks in my hometown, I probably averaged an hour a day for 365 days. Now, it wasn't like that, but I played a lot of hockey. I skated a lot. So in today's world, in the structured world, in the culture that we have, whether we like it or not, it's reality. We kind of have a little bit of a saying with our group in that we don't really mind spring or summer hockey as long as it looks nothing like winter hockey. And what I mean by that is that it's undercoached. It's a little bit on the players' time, on their deal. It's 3-on-3 cross ice. It's pickup hockey. It's pond hockey. There's skill sessions. But as long as it's not refereed, overcoached, over-traveled, all this other stuff that really starts to suck the life out of the passion of a young athlete, then it's fine. It's good. It's an opportunity to get better. And so we're really pushing age-appropriate practice-to-game ratios, length of season, and all this other stuff that's really kind of gotten in the way of not only development but growth of the game. And so we're really pushing hard to get people as close to our guidelines as possible. One of the big issues, and Glenn mentioned it last night, especially out east, is we have a lot of our teams have tryouts in April for the following year. And if you think about that, how much a kid changes over the summer, it's insanity. But what started that was mom and dad wanting to know exactly where their kid was going to play next year. So they have their tryout in April. If they don't make the A team, they're going to jump to the next town over and try out for the other team, and try to keep going until they find an A team that'll take them. And the rinks want their money up front. They want to know that their customers are coming in the door. They don't want to be left holding an empty bag in fall. And so it's really a business model, not a development model. And so what's happened in where I live is the business side is really driving youth sports. And so what we've gotten people to do as an alternative is to tell people, listen, you're going to be part of our association. You have a home here with us. But we're not going to tell you what team you're going to be on until a month into the season. Because the first 4 weeks of our season is not going to be tryouts. It's going to be skills practices, individual skill development focus, and then we'll have our tryouts a month in so that you don't have to run around and feel like you have to do all these clinics and all these other things all through the summer, all through the fall to get ready for tryouts. And so there's multiple issues there, but as administrators and leaders of the sport, the more we can not invade into other seasons athletically for young athletes, it's absolutely critical.
Bernie, the best I can suggest is, having watched AA professional baseball, I just fell in love with the split season. And I can't see why we wouldn't in hockey start our AAA players, okay, their program in September, the last week in September, October and November, first week in December, which gives them, 10 weeks of hockey. You play and you finish first to 12th for how many are in your program. You then play tournaments the rest of December. You start in January, your second schedule. Brand new, everybody has no points. You go January, February, first 2 weeks in March, and then what you do is you rank your teams at how they did in the second half of the schedule. Then you get your points for being first or whether you're fourth. Then you line them up for the playoffs, and you have short tournament-type playoffs. Right now in Ontario, we have kids that are finished hockey on February the 4th. They're knocked out. They don't have any more hockey to do unless they're in a tournament away down the road. So that means practicing for 3 or 4 weeks till that tournament comes up. If our focus is development, don't make the season, if I have a bad start, the end of the season, the first month can kill me. Give me that second chance to develop the team, and that's where coaching really comes into play, and I think has a major impact. We spend too long trying to determine how many rounds of playoffs we're going to play in order to get to where we say, we're now winning the provincial championship. We need to shorten that process and put it into tournaments.
Well, I'm just going to say that in Minnesota, we wrestle with the length of the season all the time. I said we start our tryouts in late September, early October, but we do have fall clinics going on in many associations in September. We do have teams that get eliminated from state playoffs as early as mid-February. So that's where we kind of say, well, is there a way to add another kind of second season for these kids? Because some teams are playing into March, these kids are done. So how do we reconcile that? And every year we kind of come back and just kind of spin our wheels a little bit because there's other things that in play. Other sports start up, other sports continue in the fall, but in spring there's other sports. And in Minnesota, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but spring break is huge in Minnesota. Everyone is tired of winter and wants to get out of there. So anytime we try and schedule something beyond March 15th, we get a lot of blowback because kids are going to be gone and different schools are different weeks in March and April. So we haven't taken any major steps on changing our season, but I'm intrigued by this split season idea and might have to bring that up.
Yeah, most of our kids are recreational players. I think it's 4% of all hockey players will play junior, college, or something like that. So we're really talking about what's best for the most of our clients, which is 96%. I like our ice Renan. When's it going in? October 1st or a couple of days there, and then we played till March. And when I coached, that was enough. I was ready for a break. And a lot of the pre-ice goes with tiering. If I ran hockey, I wouldn't tier any hockey till at least Pee Wee. We're out in Deloraine when Renan was a young kid. We had a family move in from South Africa. Omar, he was our. I don't know if I can say this anymore. We called him our token Muslim, but I don't know if you can decide if it's appropriate anymore. And dad was Muslim, and mom was an Irish Catholic who could drink whiskey like better than anybody on our team. But anyhow, they were there. We had another kid come in from England. They just played on the team. The year above was Renan's sister Amber, who was a kind of a pioneer for hockey in our area. Her centerman was Chris Nielsen, who played with the New York Islanders. That's the way it ran in our town, and I just loved it. I love the Minnesota model, like stay at home, play with your buddies. Like you don't have to drive all over the place and stay in a hotel and cost your parents lots of money. Like we're spending more, like for an IP team from Deloraine to drive to Verdun 75 miles and back 150-mile round trip for 50 minutes of ice, to me is silly. Like we can be smarter than that. We can be better than that. So I think go hard within the season, play other sports. I've seen lots of kids that I know who played summer hockey and year-round hockey quit when they're 16, 17 years old. Like I can make you a list of 20 or 30 kids right now. So go hard in season, play other sports, develop as an athlete. You're hearing that all the time now. What they want is athletes. And hockey is a late specialization sport. It's you're not your best player at 12 isn't going to be your best player at 18. All these guys who didn't get drafted or that suddenly at 17, 18, 19 become, and Roger, probably you had some of those kids on your World Junior team that were just those late maturers. So, play within your season. I would get rid of tiering until it's necessary and just stay at home, have fun.
Roger?
Yeah, and I'd just like to spin off that because it's a great point. And one of the things we try to stress, and I learned this from a gentleman I know who's been here a couple times, Doc Norris, Steve Norris, who I've spent a lot of time with over the last 8 years, and I've learned a lot. But the one thing that I heard from Doc Norris once that has stayed with me ever since is that the environment that the best hockey player and the weakest hockey player is in, as far as formatting and what your focus is exactly the same until about the age of 13, 14. And I tell people all the time, think about, and I don't know how schools are structured here, but I'm guessing it's fairly similar to the United States. And as a former 8th grade earth science teacher, there's no honors courses in elementary school. The best student is in the same classroom with the weakest student. which puts a lot of pressure on the teacher, but a really good teacher knows how to teach the bottom and the top and the middle. But what happens in youth sports is we take all supposedly best players at young ages and put them on the same team. And we try to train them differently than the weakest players. And to Bob's point, and the same thing in our country, the top 2 or 3% is the so-called elite hockey. The rest of them want to play and they want to get better. So how you treat your weakest player and your best player as far as format, what they're taught, environment, it's exactly the same. So this mentality to pull them out and treat them differently, and we have to travel across the country to get better competition and all this other stuff that never happened in our generation, doesn't happen in Minnesota at a young age. And there's a reason why they're pumping out really high-end players in numbers, is because their environment is exactly the same. And you stay home, you play in your community, and you develop with your buddies and your friends and your family.
Glenn?
Yeah, so I want to build off that because we have a case study in Minnesota, and Roger's very familiar with it. But Minnesota, as much as I blew it up last night, it is not perfect. We do have associations that pull out their, they have their elite mite teams. Their top kids are on this team, and they tier their mite teams. And to I shake my head at that. But there is a case study, and it's my hometown. I'm not just saying it because it's my hometown, but Duluth has a pretty unique structure. That you don't play for Duluth hockey. You actually, for mites and squirts, or 8U and 10U, you play for a neighborhood outdoor rink. That's where you play. And in those rinks, they had squirt A and squirt B, and then mites. But Duluth did something pretty revolutionary because they realized that they were losing a ton of kids from that squirt age and then from that squirt to peewee age. And so what they did was they eliminated squirt A and they eliminated squirt C, and they made all kids squirt B. So the best kids are on the same team as the worst kids in each of these neighborhood rinks. And the reason they did that was because they figured out that they were weeding out too many kids too early, and those kids that were on the B or C teams, there's no future in hockey for me, so I'm getting out of here. Well, what they saw was their retention rate went from about 65% to about 90% since they made that change about 5 years ago. Doesn't seem to have too much effect on the top players, because a couple years later, all kids that only played Squirt B hockey were on a Duluth team that finished second in our state Pee Wee AA tournament, which is the highest level of Pee Wee AA, or Pee Wee. We had people from Duluth come to our hockey director conference, and Roger was there, and I'm sitting in the back next to Roger as he's listening to Duluth share why they did this and how they did this, and I'm going to edit his response, but he's going, this guy's a rock star. This guy's a frickin' rock star. And it really showed, USA Hockey has been trying to do this, and Duluth is really the only one that's done it in Minnesota. We're trying to get more, at least at the mite level, to do a structure like this, but just to weed kids out, or to tell kids that you're better than these kids, and it's just fun for you. Just let the kids play together. And Roger said, people will say, well, the best players are gonna get worse if they're, there's no competition. They're skating against the worst player on the ice. Well, have the coaches work together. We're all in this together. So the coaches will put their top kids out against the other team's top kids. Okay, you're switching lines. Here's our second line. Here's your second line. So just, work together on this, and the results will be incredible.
The toughest thing would be parents wearing a jacket with League B instead of AAA, wouldn't it be?
Exactly. And Roger asked, people in the metro Twin Cities area, why wouldn't everybody do this? And immediately the response is, well, if we do that, then kids are going to go to the private club team in town, and because they do have elite teams and they do full ice mite games and all this, and that's probably true. Some people will leave, but you have to do. Are we doing it for what's best for those 5 elite players in our association, or are we doing what's best for all of the kids in the association?
I think the biggest move we'll ever make in hockey in Canada is when the National Hockey League moves the draft up 1 year, and we at minor hockey decide that we are moving it up 1 year in Ontario and 2 years in the Western Canada. We are telling kids that are bantam age, you have to be at your peak because that's your draft time. We're telling kids at bantam age, you're telling your coaches they have to be at peak. That's when university coaches are coming over and talking to kids now at bantam. We need to keep them in the minor system until they're 16 and they're drafted at the 16 years where they used to be. It will bring more time in the minor hockey to do that program. It will keep kids at home. It will keep them in their community. It will keep them in their program. Nothing different really than what Minnesota's doing with high school hockey, keeping them in that structure. We push them out. We push them that they have to be better at 10 and 11 and 12. When they don't, and somebody just said here earlier, at 12 years of age, they're not going to be the best kid at 16. And we have to make sure that we allow all of the kids to continue to try to peak at 16 rather than 14. If you ever get a chance to say something to your local leadership, push them, because I'll tell you, it's going to hit the table this year at the National Hockey League to change the draft, and it's going to come back and then hit it at the Hockey Canada level for our boys and girls.
When we talk about seasons, I had the opportunity to coach at University of Western Michigan with Andy Murray for a year, and I was just down there at a Hockey USA weekend, which was a great time. And we get along great with the Americans. We fight like hell on the ice, but we really share well. Anyhow, down there, when you're talking of seasons, Andy's team is playing their first game today. Okay, it's their first game. They'll be done their league in the middle of February. If they qualify for the playoffs, they'll play March. If you look at the kids who go to college hockey, they're usually not drafted in the first 2 or 3 rounds of the Western Hockey League draft, which shouldn't be 14. It's just ridiculous. And they get kids in the later rounds, and the amount that the NCAA are putting into the NHL is phenomenal. They practice all week and do those things, but they're taking those kids down there, developing. Our team had, of our 6 defensemen on our team, all undrafted players, 5 of them signed NHL contracts because Andy's a great coach and they practiced all the time. But their season is way less than what most of our kids are playing. And that's why I say go there. It's intense. Train like crazy, get off the ice, do some other things, and come back fresh, ready to go.
Yeah, I guess again, as the moderator, I'm not supposed to comment, but I will anyway.
I'll moderate. Do you want to?
No, people won't want to hear what I want to say. But I guess the thing that, from in my position, I don't think people know what they don't know, and probably the collective years in hockey up in the stage alone is, probably over 100 years, adding Bob in for sure, but it mystifies me how people in hockey. And Bob and I, in a presentation we did at the Under-18 Worlds a couple of years ago, was echoed to us by the USA Hockey guys and some guys from a Swedish club, is everyone in this country is an expert. And I don't, I've spent 24 years of my life at Hockey Manitoba. I took sport administration in university prior to that. I started as a sport administrator in 1990, so I put 27 years of my life into sport administration, 24 of that into hockey as a development person. And yet, the stuff that we say doesn't seem to resonate with people. And I really don't understand the pushback we get when we make suggestions, the comments we get about ruining kids' lives. Peter gets the worst of it for sure as the executive director, but I don't understand. It absolutely mystifies me. But it doesn't mean I'm going to leave my job. I try to make the game better. So from my position, that's my responsibility, and that's all I do as an employee of the organization. But anyway, that's just my personal comments. We have to. I'll finish this topic this way. And again, Peter and I and the senior staff of Hockey Canada and the senior staff of the branches will be together next week discussing this very thing. We need to change what we're doing. If we have 9% of the hockey playing population or kids playing hockey, you know, even a little bit less in the States. You know, something has to change. We need to change the way we structure our game, because there are not more kids coming in the structure we are currently doing. And so I'll just leave it at that. I mean, it'll be something that will have to be on as a discussion point during our meetings, and probably what we're going to be doing as an organization in the next few years. So I'm going to leave that, and I'm just going to, I know we only got a couple minutes left. Just a real quick comment, another pet peeve of mine is early specialization. And I just want to get everyone's maybe 30 seconds to a minute from each person about what early specialization is done for our sport and just you know, sport in general. I know Roger's made a comment about it. I have a decent background in long-term athlete development, helping Hockey Canada write our athlete development model, obviously with a lot of help from the American development model guys from USA Hockey. But maybe just a quick comment from everyone, and we'll wrap it up from there.
It doesn't work. Early specialization is well, the biggest thing we're pushing against, and I'm going to be presenting here next, and the focus of it will be age-appropriate training and the culture and environment you folks help set up in your associations. You know, for every kid who specialized early that we now watch on TV, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of kids who tried to get, or somebody tried to push them to early specialization, and it blew up in their face. So the exception to the rule is the superstar from age 6 who played hockey year-round, didn't play any other sports, and now is playing in the NHL. Because I know, spending 20 years in college hockey and coaching guys like Timmy Thomas and Marty St. Louis and John LeClaire, those guys weren't the best players when they were 10, 11, 12. I mean, Christ, I had Marty for 4 years in college hockey. Nobody wanted him. My uncle was a GM in San Jose. I asked him, please, Chuck, draft this kid in the first round. I mean, in the last round. I know he's only 5'5". He's said he was 5'9". He's not even close to that. And I know if he fails, you're probably going to take a big hit because he's not 6'4". But the kid can play, and he's going to play in the league. Couldn't do it. Couldn't talk anybody into doing it because nobody thought he'd ever play. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, undrafted. So for every guy on the opposite of that, there's way more Marty St. Louis. And guys like Brett Hedican, who's a friend of mine, played in Minnesota, didn't even make his high school team, and played in the NHL for 15 years. So there's story after story of late developers or late bloomers than there are for the early matures. So early specialization is a disaster, and I would strongly encourage you to push back on that within your own associations.
I'll touch on it real quick too. So I mentioned those guys in Minnesota that are in the NHL now, and not only were they multi-sport athletes through age 12, 13, but Anders Lee, Matt Niskanen, Ryan McDonough, three sport athletes through their senior year of high school. And that is another reason why I think the Minnesota model is successful, is it encourages these kids. They never have to give these sports up if they don't want to. And I mean, it's proven throughout that athletes make the best hockey players. The other thing, a pet peeve of mine that I do see is oh yeah, you know, our kid, he does hockey, and then he also does baseball, and he does soccer. But the hockey is year-round, and then the soccer and baseball are just kind of accents to that. And I think, you know, it was Wayne Gretzky, I think, who said when he was a kid, you know, his favorite thing was putting the skates away in the summer and never touching them until fall rolls around. It made him so excited to play hockey. So I wish there was a little bit more of that. And, you know, while Minnesota does have a lot of multi-sport athletes, we could certainly do a better job of it.
I want to give a vote of congratulations to our American friends, because they've grown the game so much at the base that they're now producing hockey players that exceed what our talent is in many areas. McDavid is a great hockey player. He was the hardest working junior at his time coming through. He did not know to take a day off. He would work every day. That's why he's as skilled as he is. But we're in a situation that we used to have 17 Canadians on an NCAA university team When I was coaching junior A hockey at the Tier 2 level, I looked at Notre Dame. I think they had two Canadians on their team this year. The number of opportunities for Canadians to go to American universities is decreasing rapidly as Americans, in numbers increase as talented hockey players. Good athletes who choose hockey and can excel in it because their numbers are there. We have a challenge. We have to find a way to grow more players into the game. But we also have a bigger challenge is that in Northern Ontario, we had 20 AAA teams at one time in Northern Ontario. We have 3 now. The population has decreased so much in Northern Ontario that they now are AA classification, no AAA players being developed at that level, 3 teams. So when you're struggling with that numbers, in your branch and in your province, it's going to be difficult to have those elite athletes, go on. And that's why I think we need to keep those athletes longer, not tell them they're done by the time they're 14, keep them longer and see if we can progress, with that option.
Yeah, I just agree with everything that was said, and multi-sport. I think if a kid plays one sport, there's an awful lot of pressure on him or her from mom and dad. Mom and dad are spending money. They're investing all this. Just let them be kids and play different sports, develop themselves as good athletes. I know Renan back in the corner is the same age as my son, and the whole hockey team played volleyball. Like, why do plyometrics? Go play in a volleyball team. They played baseball. They won provincial baseball championships. They played hockey. They were all in the high school drama, which were musicals. So we had our hockey players up dancing around. Who were you? Jubilation cornballers. What was that? Little Abner. Yeah, Ren was the lead in Little Abner. So but they did all this, and even in hockey season, we always had arguments like, if you miss a hockey practice for volleyball, you're cut off the team. We didn't do that. We had kids at provincial. I remember the year that Ren and the guys played provincial volleyball. We played games with 10 or 11 players because what an opportunity. Go play provincial volleyball. You can be a provincial champion. Missing one hockey game, what's that going to make? Difference is that going to make? So let them play. Don't put the kid in the position where the volleyball coach and the hockey coach are arguing and put pressure on the kids. Just talk to them and sort it out and let them be kids and let them enjoy. The good players will always come to the top with good attitude and good coaching and good opportunities, and just take the pressure off and let them be kids. I remember with this volleyball thing I'm telling you, but Andy Murray, I'd always pick up the phone with Andy, and I said, Andy, what would you do in this situation? He said, let them play volleyball. He says, if they're in hockey, there's going to be somebody telling them what to do for the next 10 or 20 years of their life. Let them be kids.
Well, look, I'm getting the hook, so thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks very much, guys. I just comment on Bob's comment there about missing hockey games and that. Unfortunately, I missed a number of games when I was growing up, and not by my choice, but usually the coach's choice. And Rogers indicated he spoke about specialization, and all I know is that my parents thought I was pretty special when I was growing up. So it's great that we're very fortunate to have people like on both sides of the border here that are involved in the game, that have dedicated their lives to the game of hockey, and they provide certainly some tremendous knowledge and leadership to a lot of our fellow coaches and organizations. And it's it's people like this that have been involved in the game for quite some time that all make the game a little bit more attractive, a lot more interesting, and certainly we're very happy that these people are involved, and it's great for the future of our game that they're being able to pass on their knowledge. So I'd like to thank them for that. So I appreciate Bernie moderating this afternoon there, and keeping us on track there. And I'd like to thank all the participants in this afternoon's hot stove. Okay,